Thank you so much for joining us for the next session of the Founder University Education Series. We are really excited to have yet again Liz Heiman, who's going to talk about some really excellent things about value proposition canvas and how to talk to your customers. So for those of you that may not have been able to attend last time or are not familiar with Liz, Liz is a national sales expert and the founder and CEO of Regarding Sales. Her firm focuses on building B2B sales operating systems that drive extraordinary growth for her clients. Liz uses a combination of strategy and processes to create a roadmap for success that focuses on clients getting the results they need. With a master's degree from UC Santa Barbara and a bachelor's degree from the University of UC Davis, Liz is an experienced international political economist, well-schooled in digging through the data to interpret the results. With her unique background combined with her focus on strategy and process, Liz delivers clients concrete solutions for different sales problems. Furthermore, Liz has been a major mentor and participant in our StartUpNV programs and the startup ecosystem here in Nevada for some time now. So we are really excited to have her here again to speak with us. With that, Liz, please take it away. I'm going to stop sharing so that you can. And thank you so much for coming again to speak to our ecosystem.
So I'm Liz Heiman, and my mission is to take the mystery out of sales, to take the chaos out of sales as well. So I make sales manageable and predictable. And I believe that those are things that can be true and should be true. And with enough work, we can make it so that we actually can predict sales and we can manage our salespeople. So I guide ready to scale founders to create a sustainable growth strategy that strengthens pipeline, streamlines their process, and increases revenue on a predictive basis, meaning you can predict your revenue. You know, it's a miracle to think that way. But let's start thinking about being a founder in the phase that you're in. And there sort of becomes this moment and you're like, how do I do this? Who's doing what? What now? What next? What do I say to people? What am I supposed to be doing? So thus, Maggie and her team have set up this series of trainings for you. And I'm going to talk specifically about how to talk to customers, who to talk to, and what next? How do I do this? How do I think about this? So the beginning really is understanding the problem. What happens when we start selling, or what happens when we create a company, we create a product, we get really involved in the product itself, in its features, its functions, what it does, how cool it is, that, you know, we get really involved in the product. And I'm going to tell you right now, no one cares about your product. Ouch, right? That really hurts when somebody says it. No one cares. You did all this work and no one cares about your product, because what they care about is their problem. So if we always start, when we're thinking about our customer, when we're thinking about our business, when we're thinking about conversations, if we always start with understanding the problem, it completely reframes our conversations, and what we talk about, what we say, how we talk about it changes with that perspective. So we're going to stay really focused on understanding the problem instead of thinking about our product, our solution, our whatever it is that we're selling. Okay, so what the first thing we want to do when we start talking about problems is we want to really think about who has the problem that we're trying to solve, right? So who in general, what companies, what people within different companies, who has a problem that we're trying to solve? How serious is that problem? Is this just, yeah, this happens. It's no big deal. We live with it. It's not a problem. It doesn't slow us down. It doesn't cost us very much. Or is it, I can't run my company until we get this solved. Like everything is falling apart around me until I get this solved. So you really need to understand when you're talking to people, not how big you think the problem is, but how big they think the problem is, because your entire conversation changes based upon, oh, that's a nice to have versus I can't live without this. So that's the first thing, is understanding what problem do they have? How serious is the problem? And what words do they use to talk about the problem? So we tend to talk about our solution using our words and our perspective. That's not helpful to our customers. Our customers really need for us to talk to them about their problems in their words. So people often say to me, oh, everybody can buy this product from me because it saves money and, and it makes them more efficient. And that's important to every business. And I'm going to tell you right now that, again, no one cares unless they say to you, my problem is that my team is so inefficient. We're getting done a quarter of what we should be getting done. Now, this is a problem they've identified in their words, not you saying, I can increase efficiency and every company out there needs to increase efficiency. Maybe I don't. Maybe my bigger problem is making sure my customers are happy. And that while our efficiency is lousy, it's even worse that my customers aren't happy. So I've got to solve that. Maybe I don't care how efficient my car is. I want it to go really fast. So again, we can't think about it from our perspective and what we think is important. We have to start from, what is my customer's problem? What are they talking about? What words are they using? And how much of a problem is it to them? How important is it? How do they feel about it? Oh my goodness, emotions. We're actually talking about emotions in sales. How do they feel about this problem? So once you have identified the problem, their words, the importance of it, all of those things, now we can start talking about the solution to their problem. What will the solution solve the problem for them? Will it solve the whole problem or only part of the problem? What new problem will your solution create? Because guess what? It often creates a new problem for them. And are they willing to accept the cost, the effort, the time, whatever it is that's associated with your solution to their problem? So these are the kinds of things that we want to, when we start talking to our clients, these are the kinds of things that we want to talk to them about. And again, we can't talk to them if we don't understand their problem and their words and how they feel about it. So let's go back to this idea of priority. How important is it to them? You want to find out, how much is the problem costing them in time, in trouble, in opportunities? I don't know if you're familiar with the word opportunity cost. It is a really important word in business, because while something may not seem like a big deal, if my workers are doing that, fixing the equipment instead of creating new products, there's an opportunity cost. So not only are we having to pay to fix the problem, but we're missing the opportunity to sell more than we're selling. So what opportunities are they missing because this problem isn't solved? You need to understand for them, what other problems come before fixing this problem? What else is a higher priority? I know you want to pave the parking lot, but oh my goodness, you don't have enough beds in the hospital for your patients. So I guess before you pave the parking lot, you're probably going to get more beds. Right? So how does this line up in the list of priorities that they have? Because it may be important, maybe a pain point, but if it isn't a priority, it's not going to happen unless something major happens, like, oh, COVID, and now we have to put people out in the parking lot because we don't have enough beds. Now, the bed problem we had to solve really quickly, but now we got to solve the parking lot problem because we can't put them out there because it's such a mess, right? So what's the priority? I know this is kind of a funny example I've gotten into, but how much are they willing to invest to fix the problem? It's a really big question. It may not seem like a lot of money to you, or it may seem like a lot of money to you, but to them, based upon what everything else that's going on with them, it's either they're willing to spend that money or they aren't. And you need to understand that. Even if they can afford it, no problem. If they don't think that they want to spend the money on that, or they don't want to spend it at this time, or they don't want to spend that much, then that you have to figure out how you're going to talk to them about that. How much are they willing to pay for the product or service itself, and how much are they willing to pay to implement it? So one of my favorite stories, when I talk to people about talking to clients and being nervous when they are quiet, kind of jumping off topic for a second, but one of my clients one time was telling me a story about how the sales rep had given him a number. And he's like, okay, now I have to add up all of these other things that are going to happen. Time people are going to be out of work, the extra computers I have to buy, all of these other things. So he's doing these calculations in his brain about the actual costs, the actual investment to fix the problem. And the funny part is that the sales rep got so nervous, they started dropping the price instead of realizing that this guy was doing calculations, because there's all of these other calculations that you haven't figured out yet. that are part of what they need to decide in order to implement. So it's not just the cost of your product or your solution, it's actually what it costs them to implement it. If I get all new furniture, I have to get rid of the furniture that I have. It has to go somewhere. It has to be paid for. It has to go in the dump, has to be moved, right? So all of these things are costs that are associated with your product. Okay, so now that we've sort of set a framework for this, we're going to talk about this thing called the value proposition canvas. And I think this also comes from Strategizer, but I'm not sure. I can't remember where I found this, but this is the value proposition canvas. And it's kind of a cool tool. I didn't create this again. So this puts together two different pieces. Just like last week, we talked about internal and external. Now we're going to put together these two different pieces. We're going to talk about your ideal customer, and we're going to talk about your solution, because your solution doesn't matter unless there's somebody to buy it, right? And then until we understand the customer's problems, the solution is irrelevant until it's a fit. So let's kind of dive into the different parts of this. And I forgot to say, shame on me. If you guys have questions, please put them in the chat. If you have questions or comments or don't understand or need me to slow down, and Logan will stop me and we can talk about it. So if you had any questions on what I was just talking about, please put them in the chat, and then let's go on to this. Okay, so your ideal customer or your buyer. Let's talk about this concept of an ideal customer. So you may be thinking, yes, but anybody could buy this from me. Anybody could buy this. Every company needs it. Every person needs it, whatever it is. That may be true, but not everybody is going to buy it from you. Not everybody is going to really need it very much. Not everybody is going to be a great fit. So the first thing we want to do, and we talked about this last week a little bit, is understand who's our ideal customer. So our ideal customer is that person that essentially you built this for, the person that can't live without it. They're the person or the company or the group of buyers or whatever it is that it is a perfect fit, that what you're offering solves their problem perfectly. They're the most likely to purchase. They're willing to spend more money on it. They're more likely to buy it again or to refer other people to you. It's a much faster decision-making process because they really know they want it. It's a really good fit. That's our ideal customer. So we have the whole world of anybody who could buy it. Then we have this sort of target of people who are, sort of in the general arena of people who might actually buy from me. And then there's the ideal customer, the people who have the demographics. They use the right technology, they live in the right place, they have the right size company, whatever those are, but they also have the psychographics. They care about this stuff. It's important to them. If it's something environmentally conscious that you're selling, they're a company that shares those values with them. So that's our ideal customer. And we want to focus on them. Why? We want to focus on our ideal customer because they're most likely to buy. They're the least expensive to sell to. They decide the fastest. They understand your language. You share common culture. We want to focus on that group always first. It's most likely to buy from us. And then we can move out from there once we've sold to our ideal customer and we're really successful there. Okay, so if we understand who our ideal customer is, the other word it says here is buyer. This is a person who's actually buying. And that can be, if you're selling business to consumer, that is just a person. But if you're selling business to business, there are buyers, multiple buyers probably inside the buying organization who are involved in the buying decision. Some of them may be officially called buyers or procurement, and some of them may be CEOs or tech people or whoever else you might be selling to. Okay, so now that we understand what a customer is, a buyer is, let's think about what matters to them. So we always want to start from the customer's perspective. We want to think about my customer's world and what they're experiencing. What is happening in the world around them? And how is the problem that they're having affect all of these other things? And how does my solution affect all of these things? So if we start with, let me go back for a second. The first thing on the left over here was customer jobs. So customer job, I don't know why I have an S there, forgive my typo, but the customer jobs, these are the specific things your customer is trying to get done. It's every major and ancillary job you intend to help your customer get done. So if I sell technology, what are all of the things that my customer does that technology is going to help them solve? If let's say I'm selling technology into a hospital, so it may make patient's life better. It might help the doctor communicate better with the nurse and the patient. It might make the nurse's job easier because they can track information better and things don't get lost and there aren't as many mistakes. It might help quality control, improve quality in the hospital, right? So there's all of these jobs that need to be addressed, things that need to happen that your technology or your solution might touch. It's not as complex if you're talking about something that isn't business to business, but still, even if I'm buying lipstick, right? So maybe I need it to make my lips moist because I live in Reno and my lips get really dry. Maybe I need it to make me look really great. Maybe I need it to be fast and easy to put on because I only put my makeup on. I only spend 2 minutes putting my makeup on. Maybe I need it to last all day because I only put my makeup on once, right? So these are all of the jobs, all the things that I need to solve for. Are you guys still following me? And do you have any questions?
There is a question, Liz,
Okay.
from David. How do you deal with a buyer who wants to not make a mistake or they're worried about their retirement that smothers anything related to change? So I guess, either you could probably relate this to anything from like switching costs or getting them over the hump, trying new things. That's a good question.
It's a great question. So I love where that takes us. So if we remember that there are the business questions that need to be answered, and then there's the personal. When I make a buying decision for a company, I'm taking a risk. And guess what? As a startup company, the risk you represent is much higher than a company that's been around for a long time. That, we used to say all the time, nobody ever got fired for hiring IBM. So the idea that there are these companies that have been around a long time, and when you make a buying decision with them, chances are that it will be successful. When you make a buying decision with a startup, chances are you're going to have a problem because they're startups and there's still problems. So what we want to think about is each one of the buyers in the buying decision. So I just mentioned a bunch when we were talking about a hospital: doctors, nurses, chief nurse officer, chief quality officer. All of those people are buyers involved in the buying decision, and each one has a risk and each one has a benefit. And sometimes we talk about them as wins and loses. And if you think about them that way, it kind of is, it makes it more personal. So what would their win have to be that would be sufficient for them to take that risk? So maybe they're getting ready to retire and they don't want to take any risk at all. And maybe they just don't care. But then chances are either you need to wait a few months until they're gone, or there's other people in the organization that have more say and more power in the decision. Often it's just timing. Just because you want to close it right now doesn't mean that you're going to close it right now. So sometimes it just means waiting that person out. But sometimes it means understanding what would the win have to be in order for them to take that risk and possibly lose. And I will tell you that sometimes the risk is so high that you're not going to be able to move them. So for instance, if maybe it's not a risk, maybe it's something else. Maybe, my niece's husband is the competitor and they're trying to buy a new house. And if we buy it from them instead of from you, my niece gets a new house because this will be the deposit on their new house, right? Are you going to overcome that loss? No, there's nothing you can do. So unless the other people in the buying process have more power than that person, go find somebody who's really going to buy from you. Not everybody's going to buy from you. And so sometimes you can get around that person. Sometimes you just have to be patient. And sometimes there's nothing you do. Go somewhere else. Does that answer what you were asking, David? Logan, do you feel that answered, or is there more to that question?
I do, but David, please feel free to elaborate in the comments and questions if you need additional clarity. Another question from Benjamin. So here's a scenario of one buyer versus many end users. And if they're decoupled, how does this change the process? I.e., how do I align users and buyers without making the sales cycle a mess?
Okay, so let's just be thoughtful about what the word buyer means. So buyer can mean a lot of different things and users can mean a lot of different things. So often when we talk about the different kinds of people in a buying decision, I use words from a program called strategic selling. And you can use any words you want, but these are helpful to me. So there's user buyers. Those are the people in the buying process who are actually going to be using or managing the tool. They're often the people we don't bother talking to. Somebody else is making a decision for them, or maybe we only talk to the manager and we don't talk to enough of the end users to understand how this will make them successful or what kinds of problems it will create for them. So the user buyer is one type of buyer. Then there's what we call a technical buyer, and they're not necessarily a technology person. They're more of a person that has a checklist. They're often the person that will come out looking for your product. So for instance, you get a phone call from a relatively low level person who says, we're looking for this, something to solve this problem. And then you have a checklist. Does it do this? Does it do this? Does it do that? And you check off the marks. And then they say, okay, well, I'm going to send this on to somebody else in the company to review. So they're just people who are checking off boxes. They might be from the technical, they might be from the IT department. It has to work with this different set of computers. It has to work with this software, whatever. They might have check boxes. It might be legal. They might have check boxes. It might be purchasing. So these are technical buyers who have a checklist that has to be addressed before the purchase can be made. And then we have what I call the economic buying influence, who is the person who has the final yes or no, and it comes out of their budget. And so when everybody else says yes, they can say no. If everybody else says no, they can still say yes. Are also often left out of the buying process. So the question that you're asking me is, Logan, go ahead, read that again so I can get back to where I was.
Yeah, absolutely. So the question is difference between buyers and users themselves, and how do you align them to make the sales cycle not, how do you align their incentives to not make the sales cycle messy?
Okay, so what we want to do is when a buyer might, in this case, for instance, be purchasing. So purchasing is making a decision, and there are all these people who actually have to use it. So, and purchasing is a group that often doesn't want you to talk to anybody else. But what you want to be able to do is say, hey, I understand that this looks like a good fit for you. What I want to do is make sure that, in fact, we have addressed all of the potential issues that might come up from when the users start trying to use this, and we've addressed it before implementation. Can you put me in touch with, a manager and 2 or 3 users who might be able to walk me through so that I understand exactly what's going on with them, and we can make sure the solution fits in exactly the way it should. So the idea is trying to get the people who don't want you to talk to anybody else to have a really good reason for you to talk to the other people. Because I will tell you, in the world of SaaS right now, for example, one of the biggest problems is customer engagement. And what happens is a tech person or an HR person or a purchasing person makes a buying decision and the users aren't happy, so they don't use it. And then the next year they don't renew because the users were never engaged in the buying process. So what we want to do is try and get whoever's gatekeeping to open the door to the people who are going to be impacted by the buying decision, so we can make sure that everything that they need is addressed before we get started. Did that answer it? Is there anything else that I can add to that?
I will stand. Benjamin says yes. And of course, Ben, if any additional components of that question come to bear or come to mind, please put them in the chat and we will ask them.
Okay. So I just want to back up for a second so we remember where we are. We're talking about this ideal customer perspective. So we just talked about just customer jobs. I think we're going to talk about customer pains right now. Pains and gains. So if I have a job that I'm trying to do, this is not a purchasing decision, but if I have a job that I'm trying to do, I experience certain pain before I start, while I'm doing it, and even after getting the job done. So that's the first kind of pain that we need to think about. The second kind of pain that we need to think about that the customer is going to deal with is if they actually purchase from me, they're experiencing pain now, They're going to experience more pain while we're putting this in place, and they could potentially have months of pain while we're getting the whole thing implemented and in place and onboarded, and even just getting people starting to use it and all of the things that could happen. So both of those kinds of pain we need to have in mind when we're talking to our customer. And then gains are every benefit your customer expects or desires, or things that they would be surprised by. So my customer has a problem, I'm going to solve it for them. And when I solve this for them, here's the benefit that they're going to get. And so I know what I think that is, but they have certain expectations. They have certain things they want to have happen. And those are things that I need to make sure they get. But additionally, I might be able to say to them, and by the way, I know we're solving this problem, but as a result of doing this, you will have additional data you've never had before. You will actually end up saving money over here, right? So those are gains that you want to talk to your customer about, things that make this a positive reason for them to move forward. So like, what are the things that will make them make a positive buying decision, make them say yes to you? It's the solving the pain that they're having, minimizing the pain that's going to happen as a result of implementing, and also helping them get the results and the outcomes that they need by implementing what you're doing. Did that make sense to everybody? And if not, go ahead and put something in the chat so we can talk about it. I need to go back the other direction. Okay, so we talked about, so that was the customer side. Now let's go to the solution side. So, and I'm going to tell you again, what matters most is not the solution. It's the buyer and their problem and their perspective and their worries and their wants and their needs. All of those things are the most important thing. Now that I understand that, I get to fit my solution into their world. It always goes in that order. So the solution could be, I sometimes use a product, sometimes I talk about a solution, it could be a service, it could be any number of things, but we're just going to call it a solution. I actually have a client that makes solutions, which are minerals in a chemical solution. So there you go. It could be any kind of solution. Okay, so we're going to talk about gains, we're going to talk about products and services, and we're going to talk about pain relievers. So we talked about it from the customer's perspective. Now let's talk about your seller perspective. And this is the connection of value proposition. This is the connecting of my customer's problem, my solution to my customer's problem. So let's talk about how do you create value. So how your products and services eliminate customer pains or create customer gains. So we often talk about problems. What problem does my solution solve? It isn't always a problem. Sometimes it's I wish I could do this. It would be so cool if we could do this. If we had the ability to add this, we could do all of these other things, right? So sometimes it's about where you want to go in the future. It's about opportunities for doing more. And sometimes it's about actual pain or problems that somebody's experiencing. So if somebody says, if you're like, well, my clients don't really have a problem, I'm actually taking them in a whole new direction, that's okay. We still want to talk about what you're solving for. And so your products and services are what your product value proposition is built around. So it starts with a customer's problem. And now I can say, I solve that problem by doing this. Okay, so I solve that problem by having lipstick that moisturizes your lips and stays on all week. I solve that, or all day or whatever. I solve that problem by providing a SaaS tool that does this. Okay, so when we talk about all products and services, your value proposition is built around what we're really saying is, how do I solve the problem? How do my products solve the problem that my customer's having? And again, we don't lead with that, we follow with that. Customer's problem, in their words, how my product, my solution solves that problem. And for me, the value proposition is really where the buyer's problem and the seller's solution intersect. Okay, so your value proposition, and I've said this 100 times, and I'm just going to keep saying it because the more times you hear it, the more likely you are to believe me and start saying it. So when I talk about a value proposition, it's three things. It's my customer's problem in their own words, how I solve it, and the third piece is critical. We talked about ideal customer. So why my solution is the best solution for my ideal customer. My solution may not be the best solution for everybody on the planet. You know, some people just might like lip gloss. They don't want lipstick that stays on all day. My solution may not fit with the technology that this organization already has in place. Whatever it is, it has to be best for your ideal customer. And when it's best for your ideal customer and you know who your ideal customer is, it's so easy to tell your story. It becomes really hard to tell your story when you start trying to sell everybody, not just your ideal customer. So when I say, oh, this is the problem I solve, and this is how I solve it, and it's the best solution in the whole world for everybody, it's not, and it never will be, and it's okay. Because the more you narrow your answer, your discussion, your story for your ideal customer, the more likely they are to find you, the more likely they are to hear what you're saying, and the more likely they are to buy from you. The broader your story is, when you start trying to make it fit everybody, it really doesn't. And guess what? As a result of that, no one can hear you because it doesn't resonate with them. So what we say in the world of marketing is, when you start trying to sell to everyone, you sell to no one. When you're trying to speak to everyone, you speak to no one. So your job when you're building your value propositions is customer's problem in their own words, how you solve it, and why I'm the best solution for my ideal customer. And the other thing that is next in this is that within an organization with multiple people involved in the buying decision, that value proposition may have to adjust a little bit, because each one of those people in the organization, or each different kind of person, has a different relationship to the problem. So the person in quality control may have a really different relationship to whatever the problem is than the person that's on the assembly line. They might have a completely different feeling about what works or what doesn't work, and why it works and doesn't work. So those are two really critical things about your value proposition. It has to meet this criteria. And then you also have to remember that different companies, you might have to word it differently for, different buyers, you might have to word it differently for, but understanding, always focusing on our ideal customer. And that's it. That's all we got. So if you guys have more questions now, would be a great time for them. And I'll just leave this up. If you want to reach out to me, you're always welcome to reach out. Reaching out to me on LinkedIn is always a good thing. I don't see that up here, but I'm the only Liz Heiman. So reach out, and I'm happy to talk to you.
Excellent, Liz. Thank you again so much. That was really excellent. And we will now field any additional questions or comments from Ben says, great job. No questions. All right. Any additional questions from online? Great presentations. Where did she get the terms economic buyer? And I think you mentioned like strategic sales or something of that nature. Can you talk about that for a sec?
The program is called Strategic Selling. It was written by, I have to have a disclaimer here. It was written by my father, Steve Heiman, and his partner, Bob Miller, in like 1979, I think. It's been around a long time. It's a standard in the world of sales. If you have never read it and you're thinking about selling into a complex buying situation where there are multiple buyers, it's a long sales cycle, go get that book. It's called Strategic Selling. It's written by, well, if you've got my last name here somewhere, just type in my last name, Heiman, and it will come up. It's an old book. It hasn't been rewritten in a very long time, but it's still really relevant. So that's where the term economic buying influence or economic buyer came from.
Excellent. There is a question from Rick. How do you determine if the buyer has the final decision? So I guess who has your final decision in this in an org?
Okay, so the first thing is that the buyer, it's very rare when you're in a business to business sale, when you're selling something that's going to impact multiple people in the organization, for there to be only one buyer. So the question becomes, who has what role in that buying process? Who has the budget that is coming out of, who's responsible in long term for the outcome. That would be the person who has the final say. They may never step up and engage in the process. They may let their team handle it until or unless something happens that gets their attention. So here's a really good example. One of my favorite stories. Forgot the name of the company right now. NCR, was National Cash Register. I don't even know who bought them, company, but they also used to sell computers. This is a long, long time ago. And NCR, I was working with the sales reps from NCR, and they were working on a deal, and they had sold into this company. Thanks, David, for ordering the book. They'd sold into this company, or they thought they had the deal ready to sign. And everybody was in agreement, and it was no problem. The CEO was not involved. So everything in that company had, prior to that, been an IBM product. So the president of IBM takes this president from this other major corporation out to golf. They have a long golf. They're 6 hours. They're golfing and drinking and eating. And at one point during that session, he said to the other guy, the CEO from IBM said to the CEO of this other company, hey, just as a side note, everything in your shop right now is IBM. If there's a problem, we're responsible for fixing it. There's no finger pointing. There's no question about who's going to get it fixed and why it's not working. We take care of it. As soon as you add somebody else's technology in there, we can't promise that will be true, because we'll never know what impact they're having on the outcome. And there'll be this finger pointing, whose fault is it? Guess what happened to that sale that day? Yes, NCR did not make that sale. But prior to that, that they thought they had the sale. So who they thought was the economic buyer, who they thought had the final decision, actually changed the moment the CEO from IBM got involved. So you will never actually know who has the final decision, because things can change. So for instance, when somebody may think they have the budget, and all of a sudden the economy changes, COVID happens, something happens, and all of a sudden budgets change, and they say, you know what? You can't buy that. All of a sudden, you only have a $5,000 buying, not a $25,000 buying ceiling, and somebody else has to get involved. There also are boards sometimes that have to vote, and that changes the nature of who has the final say. So my answer is, it's never simple. It's always about understanding the dynamics of the people in that buying organization. Asking a lot of questions. What happens next? Once you decide on this, who else has to look at it? Who else might have questions about it? Who else's budget might it impact? Who else's work might it impact? Who's actually going to sign off for it? Is there anybody else that once we get further along in this could actually say no? We don't want to ask those questions because we don't want to know the answers, but we need to. That's how you find out the answer. I hope that helped. Logan, it looked like somebody else had a question.
Yes, Liz. Okay, so from Robert, suppose a buyer says they are happy with their competitor's product, and but we can offer 20% savings, but the buyer doesn't bite, doesn't see price as a pain point. How do you convince them that price is a pain point, or that price reduction has value?
It doesn't. It doesn't have value. It isn't important to them. So now you have to find something else about what you're doing, about your solution, that would make it better for that customer, or just walk away. They're not going to buy from you because price does not matter in this case. Price often doesn't matter. We think price matters. The people that price matters to are purchasing, right? People in purchasing, their job is to get price reductions. If I'm the end user, I'm the one managing it, I'm the CEO, price matters to a certain extent, but it stops mattering when the difference is, I trust this company. I have a 20-year relationship with this company. They've never done anything wrong. We have, we do all kinds of different work together. I'm not going to change my mind on that. Your 20% isn't worth the risk. So the answer is, you can't make somebody think something is important that they don't think is important. So you have two choices. You can either identify something else about your solution that might be important enough to them to make a change, or you can go sell to somebody who either wants to pay less or is having a problem with their vendor. You cannot make somebody think something they don't think. If they don't care about it, they don't care about it. I know that's not a good answer, is it? Doesn't feel good.
I think you mentioned something there that was really interesting, is that the CEO might not, the end user CEO may not care if you work to sell to the purchaser, like one person in purchasing, that could probably constitute as, same organization, different customer, and how you strategically approach an organization. And you sprinkled that in there as well. But no, I think that was a great answer. And so did so did David. He says, not a good answer, it's a great answer.
It's
All
not
right.
a fun answer.
Oh, hey, Robert's got one here. Okay. No comment more. Or find multiple stakeholders who have a price as a pain point, or point out their other price pain points, such as the Maytag repair. Robert, feel free to clarify further if you've got additional comments or questions in there. But I think we take your point.
Yeah, right. There are multiple buyers. Some people may care about price, some people may not. Some people may have more authority. So if I have a product or service that I really enjoy working with, and I'm the person who's using every day, and purchasing says, hey, but I've got something cheaper. Now, if purchasing has the authority to force me, that's one thing, but I'm probably not going to be very happy about it. And I'm going to constantly looking for reasons for us to change back to the product I want to use. Or I might be able to tell purchasing, no, I don't care how much cheaper it is. So there's always all these dynamics, and you have to just understand who all the different people are, what matters to them. Talk to us, if you can talk to the person and understand why they're happy with what they're doing and why they don't want to change, you'll know whether or not you can change their mind. But if on the other hand, you have a CEO that's going, I don't care, we're cutting 6% of our budget. It can either be in people or it can be in product. I don't care where you get it from. That might change the conversation. So
yep,
it's always
absolutely.
about asking questions.
Thank you so much for joining us. Next week, we will have, and again, thank you, Liz. Next week, we'll be have determining sales channels and pricing with Mark Striving. This will be the
Mark Stiving.
Excuse me.
Let me share with you guys how lucky you are to have Mark. Mark is brilliant. He's a pricing strategist. In fact, I'm meeting with Mark on Friday to talk about my pricing strategy. So listen closely. He's a super smart, super capable person, and he will have great information for you.
Excellent. Yeah, excellent. He's going to do the final part of our customer discovery boot camp. So please join in. That'll cap out nicely the topics that Liz has touched on, and so of our other speakers, Daryl, et cetera. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.